Okay, we're about to start halacha ches, kuf chaf halacha ches. And just to help place where the halacha is, the first 7 halachas in the siman were roughly about which types of Keilim need Tevillah. That was the first, not exactly, but roughly that was the first 7 halachas were about which ones need Tevillah. We're now starting the next section. The next 4 halachas are about when a person is obligated to Tevillah, which is to say, Tevillah happens when a guy has a Klei and you give it over to someone who's Jewish. At that point, it comes having Tevillah. So the next 4 halachas are going to talk about details of when did it transfer from the guy to the Yid to the point that it's having Tevillah. And then the last 5 halachas in the siman are going to talk about, basically, they're going to talk about how you do Tevillah. Once we know what type of Keilim needs Tevillah, and then we got to the point that it's past the point that a Jew owns it, and now it needs Tevillah, how do you do that Tevillah? Okay, and then, Mirza Hashem, if we finish that, we'll move to Siman Reish Beis, which is the din about chatzitzis for Tevillah. Okay, that's a separate siman. Okay, yeah, that's just to put things into place. Okay, so let's read the din. The din is like this. Hashoyel, v'sorcher Klei mi'ovid kechavim. If a person borrows or rents a Klei from someone who's not Jewish, which is to say he doesn't own it yet, Ein Torah Tevillah, he doesn't have to Tevillah that Klei. It's not his, and it still belongs to the guy. He doesn't have to Tevillah. Next, what happens if a Yid bought it from a guy? He did not Tevillah it. He lent it to somebody else. So we just said that borrowing is not considered to be owning it. So the new person doesn't own it. Then Torah Tevillah, then the second person has to Tevillah it, even though he's only a borrower. When the first person bought it from the guy, it was already Chayav in Tefillah's Keilim. Now that he lent it to somebody else, it already is Chayav in Tefillah's Keilim, so even the second person can't use it without Tevillah first. And some say, well, now we have an unusual case like this. The first person didn't buy it l'tzarech suda. He doesn't plan on using it for food. He has it to cut paper. Okay, so when he bought this first person who bought it from the guy bought it not l'tzarech suda, so he's not chayav in Tevillah. And then he lent it to somebody else who is going to use it for food. Then ein tzarech Tevillah. I'm going to talk to you about that in a minute. What that means? Why he's not chayav in Tevillah. Okay, so the first person bought it to not use it for food. He's not chayav in Tevillah. He lent it to somebody else who's going to use it for food. It's not chayav in Tevillah. The Ramah says, I'll read the Ramah. We're not going to do so much of that today. A person who took it for not food use and chose to use it for food even temporarily needs to Tevillah it. He bought it for cutting paper. He still needs to Tevillah if he can ever use it for not Tevillah. Okay, I'm going to talk about this Ramah next time. What happens if the first person bought it for cutting paper, and now the second person bought it from him to use it for food? The second person needs to Tevillah. Okay, so now the case that we're going to focus on is this last case that the Mechaber said, and then what the Ramah stuck into it, which was the Yid bought this Klei not to use it for food. Okay, the Shulchan's case was he bought it lachtich klafim to cut paper. Okay, so the first person who bought it is not chayvin. He's not chayvin Tefillah's Keilim. So the Ramah says, what happens if the person who he temporarily wants to use it for Tefillah's Keilim, he becomes chayvin Tefillah's Keilim? We're going to talk about that in the future. I'm explaining to you the din. The way I'm reading to you now is the simple way. The simple way how everybody reads it in. There is a shita. Someone brings it. He doesn't accept it. He brings such a shita that says that maybe the Mechaber is talking about a very specific case. Well, maybe the Mechaber who comes from Isra Heter is talking about a very specific case, which was that a person bought a Klei, not that he chose to use it lachtich klavim, but it's a Klei that's meant lachtich klavim. Okay, it's meant for cutting paper. He describes his own example. For us, we think of a box cutter. Okay, people buy box cutters, don't use them for cutting chicken. Okay, that's not what box cutters use. They use for cutting boxes, okay, that's what they're used for. So he who wants to understand that the Isra Heter is going on the shita, which we'll talk about later, a different time, which is maybe followed by Tashmishai, that normally the box cutter is used for not food, and even if you use it for food, you might not be chayav to Tevillah. That's a very unusual shita. We're going to pass that. That's not how we're understanding. Okay, We're saying the Mechaber and the way most people do, which is, the person who bought Lachtich Klofim is not Chayiv in Tevillah. If you use it ever for food use, you have to Tevillah. Okay, but now the second case like this. The Mechaber says, what happens if the Jew bought it Lachtich Klofim, and he sells it to somebody else who's going to use it for food, you're Chayiv in Tevillah. Okay, the Chiddush of that case is like this. The person who's using it for food, he never bought a Klei from a guy. The guy owned the Klei. It was sold to a Jew who was not Chayiv in Tefillah's Keilim, because the person who bought it first had a Lachtich Klofim. That first person is not Chayiv in Tefillah. He's not Chayiv at all in Tefillah, because it's not, for him, it's not a Klei. The next person who bought it didn't get it from a guy. He got a Klei from a Yid, and it didn't need to be Tevel. So the Chiddush is that even so, Lamaisa is the Klei did come from a guy, originally did belong to a guy, now it's being used for food. So even though it temporarily passed through a state that it was not Chayiv in Tevillah, in the middle it passed to a Yid who owned it and it was not Chayiv in Tevillah, even so, that Klei is Chayiv in Tevillah, because Lamaisa, it once belonged to a guy, now belongs to a Yid who used it for food, it's Chayiv in Tefillah's case. Okay? So, before we move on, I'll just tell you, just for interest, there's a Tshuva in the Har Tzvi, who brings a riot from this din about a very contemporary shaila. Okay, it has to do with soldiers in the Israeli army who capture some other city, and they take their Keilim, okay, and questions about whether those Keilim are Chayiv in Tefillah's Keilim, and whether should you say that the Keilim became Hefker before the Yid took it over, the people who ran away because the army was coming were mafkir their stuff. And now when the people took it, they were zeiching it from Hefker. So there were those who wanted to say that it's not Chayiv in Tefillah's Keilim because they didn't get it from a guy, they got it from Hefker. And they wanted to explain why in the Torah the din of Tefillah's Keilim is by Mechemes Midyan instead of Mechemes Sichon V'Oy. It should have been that was their first Mecham, was Sichon V'Oy. It wasn't there because they were mafkir it, and it's a different din when they were doing Kibbutz Shabbat. So a whole shot as to why the Torah puts the din in, so to speak, the wrong place. Seemingly the wrong place, not the first war they had, but the second war. And therefore people wanted to say that therefore the soldiers are not Chayiv in Tefillah's Keilim when they capture these dishes. He says, no, it's not true. You see from our din, even if it passes through a state when it's not Chayiv in Tefillah's Keilim, if it once belonged to a guy and now belongs to a Yid, the way the Yerushalmi says it went out from, it had the Tumah of a guy using it, whatever that means, and now that Tumah has to be taken off through Tefillah's Keilim. We don't know what that means, that Tumah, we don't know what any Tumah means, but it had some kind of a Tumah that the guy used it, the guy owned it, he didn't even use it, he owned it, so you have to tell you what now, such as you see that he brings a riot from our din right over here, that it passed through somebody who didn't have to do Tevillah. Okay, fine, that's just so. You would interest. Okay. Now the question is like this. What would happen if the Klei, a Yid bought it Lachtich Klofim, okay, and he did not sell it to another Yid. But instead of selling it to another Yid, he lent it to another Yid. So now, the person who bought it is not Chayiv in Tefillah's Keilim. He lent it to another Yid, and that Yid who borrows it chooses to use it for food. Okay, the middle person, the person who borrowed it, the third person, chose to use it for food. So, is that like the first case? The Ramah said if you temporarily use something for food, you're Chayiv in Tefillah's Keilim. So the guy who borrowed it, he's temporarily, so to speak, using it for food. I am the owner, I don't use it for food. You're the person who borrowed it, you're going to use it for food. Is that like you temporarily chose to use it for food? So that's what the Mechaber says. No. The Mechaber says, that Ein Tzarech Latfilah means the person who borrowed from him does not have to Tevillah, and the reason is because the person who gets to make the decision as to whether it's going to be used for food or not for food, that's the owner. The owner is the one who makes that decision, and if the owner chooses to use a Lachtich Klofim, the fact that somebody else chose to say, no, I'm going to use it for food, that doesn't make a difference. Okay, I'm the owner, I get to make the decision, I'm only using it for food. That's how in the Chalkos German he explains it. You could explain it differently. Okay, but you could explain it that it's the owner who's the Chayiv in Tefillah. Okay, either way. Okay, that's what the Mechaber says. But the Isvah argues. Okay, that's what the Mechaber says, what I just told you. The owner makes that decision, not the other people. The Isvah says that as soon as the Yid buys it from the guy, even though the Yid is buying it Lachtich Klofim, as soon as he buys it, he doesn't use this word, but we would call it, he's pseudo-Chayiv in Tefillah's Keilim. Even though the Yid is not going to use it, like, partially. Okay? Even though it's like not partially, like in a theoretical sense. I'll tell you the word, it'll make you feel better. Okay. He doesn't use good word. Okay, that would help you explain it. He says, "Be'etzem, even though the yid bought lachter klafim, it's already chayiv in Tevillas Keilim. Even though he is not l'maisa chayiv in Tevillas." He says, "How do I know that he's really chayiv in Tevillas Keilim?" He says, "Because if he would temporarily choose to use it for food, let's say he takes this box cutter and he wants to cut his orange with it, okay, all of a sudden it's chayiv in Tevillas Keilim. That tells me that this thing must be sort of chayiv in Tevillas Keilim already. It's already sort of chayiv in Tevillas Keilim, or else just this little decision wouldn't make a difference. So all you have to," he says, "is once it's already partially chayiv in Tevillas Keilim, all you have to do is show just any kind of indication, any kind of show that says, I'm going to use this for food is already enough to make it chayiv. So it doesn't have to be the owner who does that little indication." He says, I'm not having a good word here. Even the owner doesn't have to be the one who gives off that little sign that he's using it for food. Even the person who borrows it also. The point is, it was already basically chayiv in Tevillas Keilim when the person bought it from the guy, even though he bought it lachter klafim, and therefore he just has to give this little show that says, we have a little food use for this thing, it's already making chayiv. And then the other guy becomes, and then so another person can do that also. Okay? It doesn't have to be the owner. Okay? That's what the Isveheta says. So the Isveheta thinks it's chayiv in Tevillah with a bracha on that. And the Taz and the Shach bring this, and they say, well, we should be choshish for the Isveheta, and therefore we should do Tevillas Keilim, Tevillah without a bracha. Okay? So again, the Machaber said, if the Yid owns it, and he's not going to use it for food, and someone who borrows it is going to use it for food, then the person who borrowed it is going to use it for food, then it doesn't make a difference. It's not chayiv in Tevillah. And Isser V'Heter says that it is chayiv in Tevillah, so Taz and Shach says you should do Tevillah without a bracha. Okay? The Pri Chodesh says he doesn't get it at all. He completely disagrees with the Taz and Shach. The Chacham Someone says he first thinks like that. That's seemingly what he thinks should be right. In the end, he comes out and he says like this. He says, if it's a Klei that's chayiv in Tevillah with the Raisa, then for sure you should be choshish for the Taz and Shach, and you should do Tevillah without a bracha. If it's a Tevillah, if it's a Klei that's only chayiv in Tevillah with the Rabbanan, it's glass. Then, if it's some kind of a difficulty, the person could be samech on the Machaber and not do Tevillah. Okay, now, his cases of being difficult, that I know one of the cases, the other one I don't exactly get. One of them is, he says, is if the person has a Klei and it's before Shabbos and he doesn't have time, and they're not going to have time to Tevel it, as they describe, the Pri Chodesh, I think also, but for sure the Chafzan, that people, this used to be a common practice, that people would borrow Keilim. How they got it from the people who didn't want it to use, you'll understand in a second. They used to borrow these Keilim. So the person came on Shabbos, they had a bunch of company, and they borrowed, 10 cups. All of a sudden, they don't have time to Tevel it, or they're not able to. It's Shabbos. That's the case I do it. The other case is you're afraid it's going to break. Okay, I wasn't sure what that meant.
You can't Tevel on Shabbos, right?
You cannot Tevel on Shabbos, correct. It looks like Tikkun. It's not actually Tikkun, but it looks like Tikkun. Okay, so it's a machlokes, but it's assumed that you're not allowed to Tevel on Shabbos. So he says, you're afraid you're going to break it. I guess the guy's borrowing it. He's extra nervous more than a regular person. I wasn't exactly sure what that case was. Okay, fine. So we have this machlokes. So it's a little bit of a complicated case. You have to just hold cup for a second. Okay, I buy the thing to lachter klafim, and I don't have to Tevel it. I lend it to you, and you want to use it for food. You have to Tevel it. So that comes like this. What happens according to the Isser V'Heter? What happens according to the Isser V'Heter said, the Isser V'Heter, not the Taz and Shach, the Isser V'Heter said, you're chayiv in Tevillas Keilim. So if Moshe borrowed it from me, he's chayiv in Tevillas Keilim. When he gives it back to me, what happens if I lend it to somebody else now? Okay? What happens if I take this Klei and I lend it to somebody else? Well, that person's going to use it for food. Well, that person has to do Tevillas Keilim. Okay, I'm the owner, and I'm using lachter klafim. I give it to him, and he's going to use it for food, so he decides he has to Tevel. That's what this Isser says. Now he gives it back to me, and I lend it to another person, and that person's going to use it, chooses to use it for food also. Does that person have to Tevel? Well, according to this Isser, no, it doesn't have to Tevel. It was already Tevel. He borrowed it. When he borrowed it, he did the Tevillah on it, so he did his Tevillah. So of course it doesn't need to be Tevel again. The next day it didn't have to Tevel, it already was Tevel. Okay? What about according to the Taz and the Shach? Taz and the Shach said that you should be machmir for the sheet of this V'Heter. So according to this V'Heter, you wouldn't have to Tevel it. What would they say about the next day being Tevel it? What would the Machaber say if the guy just went ahead? The Machaber says the person who borrowed it does not have to Tevel it. What happens if the guy did it anyhow? He decided he's going to Tevel it. Either he did like the Machaber, he didn't know the Machaber, or he did he was machmir for the Taz and the Shach, and he chose to Tevel it anyhow. Okay? He didn't have to Tevel it, but he did it anyhow. And now he gives it back to me, and now I give it to the next person. And now I give that Klei to the next person. What's the din about that Klei? Does it need to Tevel? Doesn't need Tevel? It was Tevel. either according to the Mechaber, for sure before it needed Tevillah, or according to the Taz and Shach, maybe before it needed Tevillah. Okay? So it does, was the Tevillah done or the Tevillah was not done? Okay? So Steinway says that you didn't do Tevillah. He says, you didn't do anything. He says, on the side that Tevillah wasn't required, you didn't do Tevillah. He says, so you got to do it again. The next person's going to have to do it. Okay?
Why is it worse than my Tevillah like 2 years before I use it?
Okay, so, no, because if it was Chayav in Tevillah, he said, it was Chayav in Tevillah, you did the opposite.
It's Skala that someone's going to use it for food 10 years later. So
okay.
It's Chayav in Tevillah, whenever.
No, when that person makes that decision, that's when it's Chayav in Tevillah. So yesterday it wasn't Chayav in Tevillah. Let's say I myself chose to use it locked to the club, and I'm going to use it for paper. I'm not Chayav in Tevillah. If I change my mind, now I have to tell you it. So this guy who did it, he did it before it had been required to have Tevillah. Okay, so Dynamite says, no, you blew it, you wasted your time, didn't do anything, you have to do Tevillah again.
The case Dynamite is discussing is where it was reloaned or where it was sold to somebody.
Dynamite's talking about a case where it went to somebody else who's for sure Chayav in Tevillah.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm not telling you the case it would be the same, right? According to that, it would be the same.
It would only make sense to say the person be.
It went to a person who really needs
giving the person supposed to loan to the second person.
I'm not telling you the real case. In a minute, I'm going to tell you the real case. Yes, correct. That would be true of Marshall. That's right. So Dynamite says, no, you didn't do anything. Okay, and Rabbi Blumenkrantz, okay, you've all heard of, he wrote something about 40 years ago in the very first MTJ's Torah journal called the Tevillah. He wrote a true about this topic, and he says, of course you don't have to tell you. He says, let's think a second. The guy took the Klei, he put it into the mikvah. So he wasn't chayav. Let's say he was not chayav in Tevillas came at that point. Okay, he put it into the mikvah. After he dunked it in the mikvah, a guy never owned it. Tevillas Keilim is when a guy owns a Klei, and then a yid buys it afterwards. So after the Tevillas happened, no one owned it. He said, I'm eating a little words here. He says, I'm saying, when Tevillas Keilim, it's not only effective because the person did a mitzvah. Tevillas Keilim, we don't know how Tevillah works, but somehow there's something on there, there's Tumah on there, and it comes to take it off, and you go to the mikvah. So I took the Tumah off, and I wasn't obligated to take it off. I didn't have to do that. I wasn't supposed to do that. But Lamaisa, I got the Tumah off, whatever it is, like I put it through the washing machine, the way it was supposed to, got cleaned out. Now, the fact that the mitzvah didn't happen, what does it make a difference? It doesn't work because I have a mitzvah to do, it works because it works. We don't know, whatever happens in the oil is when you stick something into mikvah, I don't know, whatever. Yeah, it got cleaned, it got tahar, whatever that means. So you were chayav. He says, so now after that happened, no guy owned it afterwards. The only chayav in Tevillah, if a guy owns it, a guy didn't own it, between the time the guy owned it and me, there was a Tevillah. So I should be safe. Okay. Now both of them, both Steinweiss and Rabbi Blumkins are both arguing, and they mention it, I'm not making this up, in Pshat and Taz. Okay? The Taz that I told you that brings the system of Heter, they're arguing about how to read the words of the Taz. Okay, like this. The Taz, remember what the Taz said. The Taz said, the Mechaber had said that if the person bought it to cut paper, not chayav in Tevillah. If he lends it to somebody else, and that person wants to use it for food, the Mechaber said no Tevillah. And the Taz said, no, let's be machmer and do Tevillah. And then the Taz says like this. He says, when the person who borrowed it gives it back to the owner, and he did the Tevillah because he was being machmer for what I just told you, he should tell the owner, I'm changing the words, but he should tell the owner that he did Tevillah. Why? Because that way, if the owner sells it to somebody else, and that person is going to be really chayav in Tevillas Keilim, for sure the guy who's chayav in Tevillas Keilim, that person needs to know that Tevillah already happened. Okay? Now, why does the other person need to know that Tevillah already happened? Okay, so the Taz's words are, Shaloi yakbilenu shenis b'bracha. The Taz says, Moshe who gives it back to me, he did the Tevillah, should tell me that he did the Tevillah, so I can pass on that information to the new, when I eventually sell it to somebody else. So that person, Shaloi yakbilenu shenis b'bracha. Okay? So what does that mean? So what's the problem if the second person is going to Tevillah? So Rabbi Blumenkrantz says, he says, what do I care if the other guy's going to Tevillah? What says, be careful, make sure the guy doesn't Tevillah. I'm trying to save him a trip to the mikvah. That's not the problem. He says, what I'm trying to do is make sure he doesn't make a bracha shen tzricha. Okay? I don't care if he makes it up, if he Tevillas it again. Let him Tevillah. Who cares? Let him Tevillah. It doesn't mean he'll Tevillah again. But don't make a shenis b'bracha because the Tevillah already happened. So you better stop that guy before he does it because he might make a Tevillah b'bracha. Because he might make a bracha l'vatala because he already had Tevillah. Okay, and there's no need to Tevillah again. Okay? And Darren Rice says, that could be pshat. I mean, he doesn't bring up Blumenkrantz, of course, but he says, that could be pshat. He says, but there's some Sefer who says not like that. Okay? Not only does he tell you where the Chasam Sofer is, he even quotes it verbatim. I used to read about this before, and it doesn't exist. I mean, I shouldn't say it doesn't exist. I'm sure it exists someplace, because he quotes it word for word. This is what he says, and he makes Yukum in the words, and Mamash, he goes on and on and on. And he says it's on the Shulchan Aruch, and this Sefkatan, he got the whole details, and for the life of me, I can't find it. When I searched the whole Bar-Ilan, it's like, I picked out, important words from there, a couple words at a time, and searched the whole Bar-Ilan of all the typed words that they've ever heard of in a zillion svarim, and the only times where it comes up is in Minchasita. And in the journal, when Minchasita printed this tshuva once before, it was in the Sefer. It pulled it up in some Torah journal up there also. Where also quotes, and then in the third place that says in Minchasita it says the following thing from Chasam Sofer. Okay, so three different places, but they're all dancing around the same story. And there he brings from a supposed Chasam Sofer, who says the Chasam Sofer says that what the Taz means is that we want that the second person should know that he doesn't. The second person should know that they have to Tevillah it, but they shouldn't make the bracha. But they have to remember that they have to Tevillah it. Okay. Anyhow, so as I mentioned, I spoke to Reese about it before, and he thought that the Pashas is like Rabbi Bloomfield said, that all the Taz is worried about is that you shouldn't make a bracha, but you shouldn't make a bracha again. But L'maisa, the Tevillah happened, it's good enough. Okay? So now, what I told you till now, I told you first the machlokes between the Machaber and the Taz and Shach, or the Sefer, and then I told you a second argument in contemporary posting about this question: what do you do if the first person, if someone did Tevillah before, so to speak, before they were supposed to? Okay?
The same question would really be if he gives it back to the original owner and then he decides he wants to use it.
If the owner would change his mind. Now, all what I told you so far, these two disagreements are very theoretical. Okay, if you want to understand it, then there's a theoretical thing. Okay, but there's a practical application to all that stuff. Okay, and that's like this. When Machaber said, the Machaber's case that he brought was the person bought it. Okay, the Machaber's case was that the person took it to cut paper. Okay, cutting paper is not having Tevillah, it's not for food use. Okay, that's the case that the Machaber says. But if you look in the Beis Yosef, he has another case. Okay, the Taz is Maramas at it. Another case, and that is not only that the person bought it lachta klofim to cut paper, which is obviously not having Tevillah. He says it, but also if the person bought it with sechorah. Okay, he bought it for business purposes. Okay, now you could question what he means by business purposes. What does he mean when he said that word business purposes? But the Taz says it out. The Taz. Say jokes later. The Taz speaks it out, and that's what everybody seems to assume, that what it means l'sechorah means is a chenveni, which is to say the person who bought the dishes, he didn't buy them to ever use. He owns a houseware store, so he bought the dishes to sell to other people. So not just the case in the Machaber was the guy who bought it has intention of using it, but he's going to use it not for food use. He's going to use it for cutting paper. But now, all of a sudden, this is a very different case. Right? Well, here, the person it's going to be used for food. It's still a frying pan. What do you do with a frying pan? It's not for cooked food in it. Okay? It is a frying pan. But I don't own the frying pan for food use. I own the frying pan because I sell housewares. I sell frying pans. So if I have it in my store, and I'm never going to use it for food, I'm going to use it only to sell to somebody else. Now, there's a chiddush here that we're considering that's considered also not for food use. We would have imagined that it's still considered a Klei Suda. It's food meant for. This is a Klei that's going to be used for food use. Not going to be by me. It's going to be by the next person. I'm just like it's passing through my store. We would think it's not Klei Suda. Okay, so the reason why that's not correct, I mean, the Beis Yosef says, and everybody accepts it, is because there's a theme, so to speak, that passes through a lot of these dinim, is that you're only chayiv in Tevillah if the Keilim are exactly the way they were by Klei Midyan. Okay, by Klei, it has to be the same way. The Torah says when you capture these Keilim from the Goyim, that's when you're chayiv in Tevillah. So everything has to be done to that. That's going to be a theme of the next couple of halachas. It has to be done with the Klei Midyan. And by Klei Midyan, the people who took the Keilim, they were going to use them. They weren't going to pass them on to somebody else, and therefore it has to be done with the Klei Midyan. So what we call it Klei sechorah, things that are going to be used for business. Meaning even I'm a salesman, so I bought the frying pan to sell to the next guy. That's considered that I'm not using it for food use. It's a chiddush, and that's considered I'm not using it for food use. Okay, so now, that now brings up a shaila like this. And this shaila is even more again nowadays, that lots of Jewish-owned houseware stores build a Keilim mikvah right into the store. Okay, think of the convenience. You know what I mean? We have you buy yourself a pot and you could Tevillah it right before you walk home. It's so convenient. Okay, so they build a Keilim mikvah right into the store. So came along the next level of salesmanship and says is not only could you Tevillah the pot before you take it home, I'll Tevillah the pot before you even buy it. I get in a shipment of pots, I'll Tevillah them all, and then people who buy them, you can not only could you be Tevillah right away, I'll Tevillah it before you buy it. Okay, so it's not so convenient. Okay, you don't need the mitzvah is so easy. I can do the mitzvah for you. You know? I can Tevillah your pots for you. Okay, so the person he wants to do it before you. So that question. So what's happening here? The person who owns it is not chayv Tevillas Keilim. For him, it's Klei sechorah. He's not chayv Tevillas Keilim. It's the case of the mechaber. He's Tevilling it before it's chayv Tevillah. When he's Tevillah, he owns it as a person. Not only the case of the mechaber that he lent it to somebody else. He's the mamash, the guy who bought lachtach klofim. He took a lachtach klofim and he dunked into it, like you sort of mentioned before. He dunked into the mikvah with his own lachtach klofim. So does that Tevillah work for the guy who's going to buy it? Okay, does it help for the person who's going to buy it afterwards, who's going to use it to cook soup in? Okay, so it's going to depend on this machlokes. Okay, according to Rabbi Blumkins, the person who did the Tevillah in the store, the person in the house where the store did the Tevillah was effective. It means that between the time the guy owned it and the yid owned it, it went to the mikvah, no chiyuv in Tevillah afterwards. According to Dayan Weiss, it was completely worth it. And actually, what Dayan Weiss and Rabbi Blumkins are talking about this case. Okay, a store owner who's Tevillah the Keilim before he sold them. That's the case they're talking about. Okay, could a store owner be Tevillah the Keilim? Rabbi Blumkins says he says if he does it, the Tevillah works. Now, both of them point out that Lamaisa, whether it works or doesn't work, there's a downside, which is the storekeeper can't make a bracha. Okay, because the storekeeper is not chayv Tevillas Keilim. So the storekeeper, the houseware store owner can't make a bracha. Asher kedushanim says if it's not Tevillas Keilim. Okay, so he's going to lose out on the bracha. So if he wants to, they say if he wants to, he could Tevillah with something that's really chayv Tevillah. Okay, he could take one spoon for himself, use it for making his own coffee, and then he could make a bracha on that and Tevillah everything with it. So, but if not, he's going to miss out on the bracha. Okay, but whether the Tevillah works or doesn't work, and whether the buyer has to do the Tevillah afterwards, if the store owner did the Tevillah for him, will depend on this question between Blumkins and Dayan Weiss. Now,
Dayan Weiss told you to make another bracha?
Yeah, does he make another bracha? I don't remember if he says to make a bracha. He for sure says do Tevillah again. I don't remember if he says to make another bracha. Maybe he's a little misophic, but I'm not sure. Okay, but I don't remember if he said to make another bracha. But the question, whether the buyer has to make, he says for sure the buyer has to make a bracha. He says the first guy didn't do anything. It didn't help him. Okay. Now, so let's move to one step further, which is, okay, the storekeeper decided he's doing Tevillas Keilim. Okay? And it's going to work according to, it's either according to Dayan Weiss it's not working at all, or according to the Minchas, according to Rabbi Blumkins, it's working, but you can't make a bracha. So at what point could the store owner say, at this point, I for sure can do the Tevillah? Okay? So we would assume that you have to wait until there's a kinyan. Okay? We would assume you have to, in order for it to be the buyers, at which point it's for sure chayv Tevillah, you have to wait for it to be a kinyan. Okay? That's what I would have assumed, that the buyer has to make a kinyan. In other words, the storekeeper can never do it before the guy buys it. What would be the kinyan? The kinyan would be Mashiach. You have to take it home with him, you know? Or Hagbah, you have to make a kinyan to own the thing, at which point the storekeeper can then do a service and Tevillah it for him, but at that point he sort of missed the idea of I'll Tevillah before you buy. So Rabbi Blumkins has this whole cheshbon that no, even once you place the order, it's already time that you could, even once you place the order, he can already do the Tevillah for the person. He can do it with a bracha. Or he says, for sure, if he tells the guy to Tevillah it. Now, he tells you a lot of details which are all true, which is, you can make a kinyan hagbah in the rishus of the moicher. Okay? You can make hagbah in the rishus of the moicher. He says, yes, you could do that. He says, and even the moicher himself could do the hagbah for the one keach. Yes, he could do that. He brings a right, you could do that. He brings rice. All those parts could work. He even brings from Shar Mishpat, who says that if a person ships something, that might be a kinyan already. If I ship it to you, it already might be a kinyan for you.
That's Mashiach.
What? And therefore what?
See, that's what's more. He's making.
Well, okay. Well, he said maybe I shipped it, but what I'm missing in all of it, because all those things that I said so far are fine. Those are all reasonable choice things to say. I believe all of his rights. The question is, did they really happen? He says as well, if I told the person to Tevillah it for me, so he made hagbah for me. He made Hagbah for you. The store owner knows about making Hagbah for you. He's trying to make a kinyan that you should own. Is that what he did? No. He told the 20-year-old in front of him, so he said, listen, go table these dishes because Mrs. Jones just bought them. So the guy went ahead. So the 20-year-old went and told this. You know he's making Hagbah for the other person? Maybe yes, maybe not. He says, if you ship it, this is from a Shar Mishra, when you shipped it already, it's as if the person had a kinyan on it because you already took responsibility, and if it breaks, it's going to be yours. Is that true? The person, he didn't even ship it yet. All he did was, Mrs. Jones called up and said, hi, I want 4 plates and 2 pots, and he put them on the side, and before he gives them to UPS, he puts them into the mikveh. So when he put them, before he gave them to UPS, it's also considered that he made this kinyan. That's shipped already. He didn't ship it already. He was getting ready to ship it. It didn't go out the door yet. It was getting ready. He titled it before he put it into the FedEx box. So how his application of those dinim, I wasn't so clear to me. In other words, you could do it. He's describing how the store owner could do it correctly, that it belongs to the person. He could say, listen here, if you want, I could tell you dishes beforehand. If you want me to do it, I'll make a kinyan for you beforehand. Fine. I could ship it. He could do it. He could potentially do it in a way that he could do the bracha. He could do to you with the bracha beforehand. He makes it as if it happens automatically. That wasn't so clear to me that should happen automatically. Okay. Now, a side point in this whole issue is, if the storekeeper is going to be doing Tevillas Keilim for you, is that person just needs to be alert that him and the storekeeper have the same things in mind when they're talking. Okay, the storekeeper says, "I'll table everything for you before you put." Okay, so the storekeeper's definition of everything and your definition of everything are not necessarily the same. Okay, I heard about this story from a Kala. Okay, the Kala bought her housewares from a store. A lot of houses from the same store, and the store says, "And we'll table it. It's going to arrive in your house on this day, the day before, and we're going to table it, and everything's going to be fine. We're going to table everything for you." When the dishes showed up at the house, for whatever reason, they started to question whether everything was really tabled, and they called the store up, and they said, "What about this and this?" And he says, "Well, we don't table China, okay, and we don't table Corel either, because they told us about some mystical coating that's on top of it, and we don't table until the coating's taken off, whatever, some kind of a thing like that." And which this Kala's Rav had told us she should table both of those things. So all of a sudden they found out that the store's idea of table everything and their idea of table everything were not the same. Okay, so even if you're going to count on the store owner, we came to the point that you count on the store to table everything. You have to make sure that your everything and his everything are the same thing. His decision on what he should table and yours may not be the same. Okay, so he's just a storekeeper. Okay, so he may have a row who tells him what to do. That's perfectly fine. But just to make sure that everybody's on the same page, that what he wants to table and you want to table is the same thing. Okay. Now, related to this, we're almost done. Related to this is like this. What happens if I buy a dish? I'm not a storekeeper. Okay, but I buy a silver platter, and I buy it to give it as a present to somebody else. Okay, so there's a few. I'm going to take it from Rabbi Yashiv. Rabbi Yashiv says, if I buy it to give it as a present, that's also considered to be Klei sechorah. Just like if I buy it to be, I'm a storekeeper, and I buy silver platters to sell to people, so too, if I buy a platter to give as a present, I'm going to give you a wedding present, I'll give you a silver platter, so the person should not do Tevillah. Okay? That's not so hard to understand. Then he takes it one step further. And he says this, what happens if I buy the platter, but I don't buy the platter. The platter is going to be a present to you, but the present is for your child Shalom Zachar. And I buy a platter, and onto the platter I put a whole assortment of cakes and cookies that you are now to put out at your son's Shalom Zachar, and you're going to put it out on that tray, and then you can keep the tray. I'm really being generous, and that's your baby present is the tray on there also. So Rabbi Yashiv says, in that case, you also should not table, because for me, the person who bought the tray, I'm never going to eat on this tray. What am I doing with the tray? I'm just giving the tray. For me, the tray is just a present that I'm giving to you, and it's a platter, and it's a nice way to carry the food over to your house, but I'm not going to eat on this tray. Okay, so now this is a whole step further. We started all the way back with a guy who bought lachlet klofim. Okay, now we're holding my person who's putting cake onto a tray and sending it to someone else's house where they're going to put the food out in the middle of the Shalom Zachar, all the cake on the tray. So, we would have imagined that's Klei Suda. Not only am I going to use it for what I already has, I'm putting food right onto it. Okay, Rabbi Yashiv says, no, but from my perspective, me, the guy who's giving it, the person who's giving it, he's not giving. He's not using it for food. He bought it as a present. He bought the tray as a present, and then he put some food onto that plate. And the next people he knows they can use it for food. That's what it is. But he's not buying it for that. So Rabbi Yashiv says that person should also not play with people.
That's like a jar, like a glass jar that you send like product in.
like a store manufacturer, that's next time. We'll do it manufacturers next time, I think, or maybe 2 times. I don't remember. That's going to come. But right now we're talking about a private person.
Right.
I just put the tray. I send it to your house to put out at your Shalom Zachor or your Kiddush or whatever it is. Okay, your Shalach Manos. Okay, I send you Shalach Manos. I send you cake. One of his examples, I send you Shalach Manos. Okay, here's all the food I'm giving you for Shalach Manos. I'm not going to eat it, but you're going to. Okay, and
it's just a way to package something. It's not like
so. Even though I'm well aware that you're going to take this tray and you're going to keep it. That's part of the point. And you're going to put it out. You're going to put it out at the Shalom Zachor on the tray. That's the
simple solution. That you just use the tray yourself before you give another.
Right, you're tricking.
I don't know all the food.
Yeah.
You eat some of them.
You're making tricks. I'm just trying to bring out the chiddush of the din. You're going to say I have a way to be Tevillah and ignore Rabbi Yasser. I'm just trying to bring out the chiddush of what he's trying to say. You're right. We could find a way to Tevillah it. I could eat on it, but that's okay. So now Rabbi Yasser. He does. No, the person he will have to Tevillah. Oh no, you'll have to wait. You have to wait for next time. You have to come back next Shabbos and find out whether what the guy has to do. That's going to be next time. Whether that person has to do anything about it. That's. The Rabbi Yashiv is quoted as saying, at least in one of the cases, I assume means in all the cases, that what happens if the person did do the tefillah, like he didn't have to. Rabbi Yashiv didn't have to do the tefillah. The guy did do the tefillah, and it was glass. Then he says, okay, then b'diavad you could be Saima. If it was glass, it's only chayv to b'drabanan. And the guy, the middle person who wasn't chayv tefillah did it. He says, okay, you could be Saima on that, and the other guy doesn't have to tefillah. But otherwise, the other person should do tefillah again. I think he says tefillah without a bracha.